sports can build bridges, it can bring people together like never before. But China's government reminds us that even in sports, they will not show basic courtesy that is supposed to be shown to another nation. First picked up a scuffle and tried to encroach territory in Ladakh while India was battling the COVID pandemic that emerged out of China. Then during the G20, objected to the theme Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. Then dilly-dallied, eventually cancelling the attendance, sending instead a premier. And now, when Asian Games, not Chinese Games, Asian Games are hosted in Guangzhou, denied the Indian players visa because China wants to claim Arunachal Pradesh as its own territory. Desperate, deliberate attacks against India, constantly and always unnecessary. Why did China reject visa of Indian athletes? Because these three athletes belonged to Arunachal Pradesh, an Indian state. People of Arunachal Pradesh are with India, voluntarily expressing support. A representative of the state is a member of parliament. He's a union minister. In heart, words and actions, Arunachal Pradesh is with India. But it is also the territory that China has been eyeing for long to occupy. That is apart from Ladakh and even parts of Uttarakhand. China wants the world to believe that Arunachal Pradesh is their land. And over this petty jealousy, their government does not let Arunachal Pradesh players participate as the Indian contingent team. Thankfully, India stood up and took a strong stand over this issue. Union Minister for Sports and Youth Affairs Anurag Thakur made a public statement condemning China's discriminatory practice and chose to cancel his trip to China, which was scheduled ahead of the Asian Games.
ओलंपिक चार्टर के अनुसार वीजा मिलना चाहिए था और ओलंपिक कमेटी ऑफ एशिया का ये दायित्व भी बनता था और चीन को भी भारत के किसी भी कोने से कोई भी खिलाड़ी जो भारत को रिप्रेजेंट कर रहा है उसको वीजा देना चाहिए।
We had a meeting yesterday with the working group as well, and it's been taken up in the working group meeting, and they're taking it up with the government, and we are also taking it up with the government. It's under discussion with us as well.
इस चीज को लेके तो सभी दुख है, हम भी दुख है, स्पेशली हमारे कोच बहुत दुख है क्योंकि सबसे बड़ा उसका ही सपना था कि हम एशियन गेम्स में खेलने नहीं मिला उसके लिए, तो ऑब्वियसली सिर्फ हम लोग नहीं, पूरा ऑल इंडिया इसके लिए बहुत दुख है क्योंकि वहाँ पे अभी हम लोग खेलना था, अभी हमारा गेम भी स्टार्ट हो गया, तो उसको देख के हम लोग बहुत हर्ट होते, मतलब दुख होते।
China gave these players deliberately a stapled visa, which is to signify that China does not recognize India's sovereignty over Arunachal Pradesh. Usually visas issued to foreign travelers are stamped, it's not stapled. India does not recognize stapled visas and does not consider them valid. Issuing stapled visa on loose sheets of paper has been a tactic used by China often to question India's claim over Arunachal Pradesh. And I must tell you, this is not the first time. Same Wushu players were again targeted in July as well during the World University Games in Chengdu. China issued them stapled visa that India does not recognize. Well, players were not the only ones who were denied usual accreditation. In 2016, Bamang Tago, manager of the Indian badminton team, was similarly denied a visa. Tago had been appointed the manager of the Indian team for the Thaihort China Open Badminton Championship. Interestingly, all 12 players received their visa except the team manager, despite submitting documents way well in advance. Imagine the hard work all athletes put into preparing to compete, and then 3 of them selectively are targeted only on the basis of their ethnicity and are denied a visa. They are unable to board the aircraft and forced to return. It must be heartbreaking, and I understand if the athletes feel this is so unfair. I say to them today, Nyeman Wangsu, Onilu Tega and Mepung Lamgu, I'm sure you're great athletes, and I hope you do not give this any more attention that it deserves with regard to China's discrimination. Indians stand with you, and we cannot wait to see you clinch gold medals at bigger events worldwide. All the very best. You are India's pride. India shares 3,488-kilometer border with China. Like most border troubles for our subcontinent, Indo-China border problem also was passed on to India by the British. But China will deliberately also miscommunicate with their map constantly and show Arunachal Pradesh, for example, on their side of the map. I mean, really, do they not see what people in Arunachal Pradesh have to say? It actually all started with the McMahon line drawn by Henry McMahon, poorly demarcated 885-kilometer long boundary in the northeast. China's plan was made clear when it claimed 90,000 square kilometers, which is the entire state, as it appears, of Arunachal Pradesh as their territory. The Chinese still refuse to recognize the borderline that was set at that time, known as the Mepung line. In April 2023, China published a list which had 11 names. These were Chinese names to places in Arunachal Pradesh, which is in Indian territory. They had earlier done something similar in 2017 and 2021. India, of course, dismissed this right away, and China cannot do much about it with these claims. But definitely it signifies what China's plans are really about. Let me take you back to 1962. India was attacked on 20th October 1962 in what famously came to be known as the SinoIndia War. This is over the Aksai Chin area. India did not expect the attack from China, so our nation was caught by surprise both politically and militarily. The standoff between 10,000 to 20,000 Indian troops and about 80,000 Chinese troops in contrast. Chinese were acclimatized, well equipped and prepared, much better compared to Indian soldiers. Always remember the legend of Major Shaitan Singh. He was posthumously awarded the Paramveer Chakra, but that signified the courage of these soldiers at that high altitude. Ministry of Defense documents, quote, "Courage and undaunted determination while fighting the enemy during the Battle of Rezangla." The fight at Rezangla was hard and bitter. Notwithstanding the disadvantages of climate, terrain and weapons, Major Shaitan Singh and the Charlie Company of 13 Kumaon, which was the Ahir Company, went all out to make sure that their defensive positions were retained at the Rezangla. The battle was one of the rare battles in military history where Indian soldiers fought till the last and sacrificed their life. Major Shaitan Singh's exemplary leadership, undaunted determination and the courage is etched in the pages of Indian history. Major Shaitan Singh was awarded the Paramveer Chakra posthumously, and while he was fighting there at that border, he was so seriously wounded but continued to encourage and lead his men, who following his brave example fought gallantly and inflicted heavy casualties on the enemy. The enemy lost 4 or 5 men for every man we lost. We may have been overpowered by the Chinese, but this was one of the legends to remember. The war continued for about a month and became the biggest Indian military lesson that we have got, which is to prepare itself way in advance and never let China overpower you in dialogue or in military strength. In 1967, India-China clashed again over the Nathula Pass. The Nathula is sandwiched between Bhutan, Chinese-occupied Tibet and Nepal and is situated in Sikkim in India. It was largely a war of artillery fire where close to 80 Indian soldiers fell in battle. Chinese casualties were numbered at about 400. It was in 1975 that the two clashed in Tulungla, where 4 Indian soldiers were tragically ambushed and killed by the Chinese soldiers at the border of Arunachal Pradesh. India accused the Chinese of crossing into the Indian territory. This was the last time when shots were fired between India and China, until 2017. In 2017, the Indian Army objected to construction by the Chinese in the Doklam Plateau region. The region is strategically important as it is a narrow passage connecting northeastern Indian states with the rest of the country. The issue was eventually resolved after holding talks. But then came 2020. India had one of the worst clashes with China ever since 1975. Indian and Chinese soldiers clashed at the strategically important Galwan Valley. There were direct fistfights and there were sticks that were used. Casualties were reported from both sides. Since then, continuous military Rever Corps Commander level talks have been taking place. Remember, amid all of this, what is the key takeaway? That India consistently tried to ensure that its own territory, while was safeguarded, that its equation, what is the biggest key takeaway from all of this? That India has ensured and tried its best to safeguard its people and its borders, and that to never trust China, not in dialogue, and this time, sadly, not even in sports. Thank you for watching. So tell us, what did you think about this explainer about India-China equation, and specifically the sort of neighbor we cannot change and we must not trust either? Coming up next with updates, my colleague Jessica Goyal with the latest.
Thank you, Pooja. Well, India isn't really discouraged by China's discriminatory practices. India's gold medal tally is proof enough. You know this cricket team? Well, make way for the women's 11. The Indian women's cricket team led by Harmanpreet Kaur won their first cricket gold at the Asian Games, participating for the first time ever. And you can't miss the young pacer Tita Sadhu, the under-19 World Cup winning cricketer from Bengal, who was the player of the final in India's winning campaign earlier this year, picked up 2 wickets in her first over. The Indian women's team has been missing a genuine fast bowler since Julian Goswami's retirement. India came into the tournament as favourites, having dominated the Asia Cup editions for the past and ranked highest among all the teams. The conditions were tricky though, and it required them to be careful in their approach. But our women in blue showed the way. Well, that's all that we have for today. Thank you for watching.
For more informative videos like this, keep watching India Today Newsmo.